introduce the fourth. Got it. I have the pleasure to introduce the Forest Health Protection folks. I want to especially thank them for coming and giving a talk on a somewhat short notice. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because 5 bios is a lot to read. But yeah, thanks for being here, and I'll pass the mic over.
Great. Well, good afternoon. I'm Joel McMillan, and I'm the zone leader of the Arizona Zone of Forest Health Protection. And we were asked to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do, and also kind of give some background on how we got into our current positions. And so we decided to come up with a name for our title of our presentation. We decided to kind of paraphrase from the State Farm slogan, like a good neighbor, Forest Health Protection is there. And again, it's just an opportunity for you to get to know us a little bit more. We're your neighbors. We reside on the other side of the atrium. We're hosted employees with the Rocky Mountain Research Station, part of the Forest Service. And so what I'm going to do to start off with is provide a very brief overview of Forest Health Protection, and again, a little bit about how I got into my current position. And then I'll turn it over to the rest of the staff, and they'll talk about what they do, their role on our staff, and how they got into their respective positions. So let's see if we can get this to advance. So Forest Health Protection, or FHP, is what we go by. So it belongs within the state and private forestry deputy area of the Forest Service. A lot of you might think about, when you think of the Forest Service, think about like the Coconino National Forest, and they're part of the National Forest System. Or you think maybe about Forest Service research, like the Rocky Mountain Research Station. Our Forest Health Protection Group sort of falls in between there. We're sort of like a little bit of a bridge between those two deputy areas, where we work closely with the NFS, the National Forest, and also work with research. We also work on state and private lands, or with state private land managers. And we made up of entomologists, pathologists, and a wide variety of other positions that are listed here related to forest health. And this map shows the locations of our different offices throughout the US. So if you're a student and you're thinking, boy, I'd like to, maybe after this presentation, you think that sounds a pretty cool job. I'd like to work with Forest Health Protection. You know, where would be the opportunities to work? So the white stars here on the map show the location of our offices, again, throughout the US. Here in the southwestern region, we have the Arizona zone here in Flagstaff. Then over in Albuquerque, we have the New Mexico zone. And so that shows where we're located. And I want to just give, again, a brief overview on the services we provide and kind of the activities, some of the things we do. And this is a screenshot of the brochure that we made up. So if somebody wants a brochure when they're done, we can hand some of these out. But anyway, this kind of provides an outline of some of the activities, some of the services that we provide. So under like technical assistance, one of the big things we do is conduct site visits. We go out and meet with the foresters on the national forest and try to identify if there's a problem and develop an effective means for managing an insect or disease pest. And we also provide assistance related to planning documents, providing information around pesticides or pheromone use. Another area that we work in is providing education and information. So we conduct annual training sessions. We're going to be having one in June on forest insect disease identification and management. We also do hazard tree trainings. So training and education is a big part of what we do. Also, a big portion of our responsibilities is conducting surveys and doing monitoring work. And you'll hear about more from some of the other staff members about aerial detection surveys and remote sensing and some of the other type of surveys that we provide. And that's kind of critical information that we provide to the land managers so they can plan accordingly what they need to do a management action or not. And it provides, again, a long history or a track record of kind of some of the insect diseases, when they're important and where they're important. Another aspect of what we do is provide financial assistance to land managers. So on our federal partners, if they have an insect and disease issue that we can do something with, we do provide financial assistance for suppression and prevention. And also a small part of our budget goes to the state, and they can also do forest health related projects. So that's just kind of a real brief overview. Again, take a brochure if you want and read up more about what we do, the services we provide. But who do we work with? We work with almost everybody. Basically, if you have a tree, we will work with you in some way. A majority of our times with federal partners, whether that be the National Forest System or the Park Service or BLM, but also on tribal lands. So we have a variety of federal partners. And then on kind of the state and private side, we work closely with like the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, and working with them on trainings and providing assistance. And also we collaborate with academia as well, and doing technology development and research projects. So like here with NAU or other universities, we will collaborate on developing a proposal and submitting it and helping out with doing the work and meeting our needs and kind of filling some of the gaps in management that we have addressed. So it's a great opportunity. We have a wide variety of opportunities to work with all sorts of people, and that keeps our job really exciting. I think that's a really cool part of our job, that we get to work with so many people. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about how I got into my current position as the zone leader of the Arizona Zone of Forest Health Protection and my career path. And I'm going to highlight a few different key points in time. And I'll start with, so after I received my bachelor's degree in biology from University of Iowa, I was trying to figure out what to do. Well, I applied with the Peace Corps, and it was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Philippines in the late 80s. And this overall was a wonderful opportunity and experience. It really taught me so many things about myself, as well as the opportunity to work with local people there. And it really taught me about partnering and communication, and were keys to success in getting work done, and knowing how they kind of do things and some of the historical practices in agriculture and forestry. Historically, in some areas, they use this terrace type farming, like these Benawi rice terraces. We kind of adopted that and did what was called, it was agroforestry related work. And I worked with some close partners with the Department of Agriculture there and a group of farmers, and we constructed these rock walls and would plant nitrogen fixing trees and different agricultural crops on there, which led to increased subsistence foods as well as commercial products that they were able to develop. It was hugely successful by the end, but again, kind of having that communication and partnering, it was very helpful. It also taught me about integrated pest management and the role of insect and disease impacting some of our projects. And so when I came back to the US, I wanted to really kind of move forward and more in that area, learn more about it. So I came to NAU quite a few years ago, and was actually the campus representative for the Peace Corps for a short period of time, but also was a graduate student with Mike Wagner, shown here. He was the professor of forest entomology at the time and Dr. Rich Hofstadter's predecessor. He was a great mentor and really taught me so much in so many different ways. And one of the cool things was we had a really international lab there. The makeup of the graduate students represented 4 different continents, and including this person here, Yichun Lin, got a master's here in forestry. She ended up becoming my wife later on. And so that was a really cool aspect of coming here as well. And she also assisted me in a research project that we had in Western United States, but also in Southwestern China. And so this was an NSF funded work. It was really a great experience going over there a couple of times and working in Sichuan province of China, continuing that international work and collecting information on a defoliating insect that was occurring in China as well as Western United States, and also provided the opportunity to do a reenactment of a historical or a traditional marriage in China. So that was kind of neat too. Things you don't think about when you go off to grad school, but ends up happening. So overall great experiences again. And those experiences and such led to me getting a job with the Forest Health Protection as an entomologist. I started first up in Rapid City, South Dakota in the Black Hills, but worked there and also in Wyoming, Nebraska, and some in Colorado. Was up there for 3 years, and then the opportunity presented itself to come back to Flagstaff for the second time and be an entomologist with Arizona Zone, which I did for about 13 years. And just a wonderful opportunity this job provides, and working with so many different people, all those partners I described earlier. And it led to a lot of other things as well. Like, for example, being a part of this Russian Far East monitoring team, I was able to join this team for a period of time. We worked over in the Russian Far East and Japan to try to monitor some important defoliating insects and prevent them from being introduced into North America. And it also led me to doing a work detail out in our Washington office, and which was a great opportunity, and actually got to sit on the desk of the chief of the Forest Service and pretend like I was the chief for about 5 minutes and kick my feet up on the desk there. So that was pretty cool. But it got me to thinking about, well, maybe I want to play more of a different sort of role with the Forest Service than I had been, and getting more into kind of a leadership or supervisory role. So after I came back a little bit later on, I applied and was offered the job of the group leader with the Forest Health Protection Group up in Boise, Idaho. So the Boise field office there in southern Idaho. And so this was a much different position than I'd had previously, but it taught me a lot about trying to develop leadership skills and supervisory skills. I had a group of 10 people that I was supervising when I got up there, which was one of the largest Forest Health Protection field offices there was at the time. And so it was, again, a great opportunity, taught me a lot again about communication and partnering, and it led me to coming back to Flagstaff for a third time, and hopefully the final time as a zone leader for the Arizona Zone of Forest Health. And so that kind of shows in a nutshell how I got to where I'm at today. And I guess from here, then I'm going to turn it over to Nick. And yeah.
Thanks, Joel. All right. Everybody hear me all right? I feel like I know most people here, but I am Nick Wilhelmi. I'm the pathologist with Forest Health Protection Arizona Zone. I'm commonly known as the Patho. So I'm going to run through this pretty quick. I got a lot to show. So just like Joel did, I'll show you my journey. So buckle up. So we're going to start here in St. Louis in the beautiful state of Missouri. Went to the University of Missouri, studied forestry, really had zero desire to go back to school at that point. Headed west, worked in California, worked in Lake Tahoe with the Forest Service for a little bit. That's where I met my first FHP pathologist, Martin McKenzie. So he enlightened me that this is a scene and this is something you could do for a job. From there, I moved over to Sonoma County, Mendocino County, worked with some native plant nurseries, doing some restoration, invasive removals. Then headed to SoCal, worked for a forester there. Came over to Flagstaff, spun some plots as a contractor, lived in the woods out in the Coconino. Met a lot of people that I now work with in a different capacity, which is interesting. Some of those people failed my plots, so I had to go back and redo. So then I moved up to Washington, worked for the Washington State DNR for about 5 years. Worked for the state geneticist up there, helping manage the progeny sites for the Northwest Tree Improvement Cooperative. That's where I kind of got interested in going back to school. I got to work with the pathologists up there as well. Met Dave Shaw, got into Oregon State, got to work on a cool grad school project there with Connie Harrington and Brad Sinclair as part of the Douglas Fir Seed Source Movement trials. So this was looking at the influence of foliar diseases on seed source movement and how that might affect system migration. So it was a pretty cool project. After grad school, just kind of bummed around for a little bit, went to Mexico for a while, kept applying for jobs, really with Forest Service jobs. Well, back then, now it seems easy to get Forest Service jobs. But it was just a battle of attrition, keep applying, keep applying. Finally got into FHP, probably because a lot of people turned the job down, but then I was there, ready to start, showed up, ready to work. So yeah, now I'm here at FHP, really excited, thankful to be here, started in 2017. So yeah, so I'm the pathologist, so I basically run around the state of Arizona looking for these guys, trying to figure out where they're at, what they're doing, and you know, getting out with foresters, getting out with silviculturists. That's my favorite part of the job, getting out in the woods with those guys, talking management. learning about what they're seeing, what they think about the different management strategies that we're recommending, and things like that. And yeah, trainings like Joel said. And there's a lot of other diseases, but these are the main players, my main coworkers here. I also run the hazard tree program, so I provide all the hazard tree trainings. Hazard trees are a really difficult issue. It's really hard to identify a hazard tree, but federal agencies really have the responsibility to maintain safe, developed recreation sites. So anywhere there's a campground, picnic table, park bench, we have to make sure that those trees around there aren't going to fail, or at least do our best and show that we tried. So I provide those trainings. Also very controversial. People hate removing trees in these areas. Usually it's the big old trees that have the most defects, and those are the trees that people love. So it's also a very controversial issue, but we got to do our best. We also have recently published a guide. This just kind of walks you through hazard tree surveys, provides kind of an outline of some of the most common defects you might see out there. We've been updating this too. I think we're going to update this. We'll have a new version out really soon. Hazard trees are a tough issue. So now I'm just going to run through some of my favorite projects that I'm working on, real brief. So I'm going to leave out a lot of details, but hopefully just give you a good broad overview. Most of you probably know because you work with Kristen, but a big part of my job is white pine blister rust as well. So it's really nice to walk into just a program that was just already cranking, plot network already installed, seeds already collected, just to kind of hop in and start collaborating with Kristen. It's really been a great experience. So some of the main things I do with this. So here's just a graphic showing where we have blister rust. So kind of started in New Mexico, kind of blew up. It's all over New Mexico pretty bad at this point. It's just creeping into Arizona, Apache Sitgreaves, White Mountain Apache Reservation. So I'll spend some time driving around looking for blister rust in the woods, probably do that next week. We also have a plot network that spans the region as well, where we monitor the progression of the disease and the impacts it's having. Another big part of blister rust is the hunt for resistance. So we're really looking for those white pines that have resistant genes to the disease. And this is a big part of sustaining white pine on the landscape. So before I got here, Kristen and everyone collected seeds from basically the range of southwestern white pine. We've sent a lot of these up to Dorena Genetic Resource Center up in Oregon, where they do the inoculation trials, so we can start to identify resistant families. So you can see the resistant or the inoculation chamber over here. Got the infected ribes just raining spores down onto the white pine seedlings, southwestern white pine seedlings. After the inoculation process, which is really cool, it's a state-of-the-art inoculation chamber, like basically a fog room. And then we bring those out to the common garden boxes, and then they'll be assessed to see who's susceptible, who's tolerant, who's resistant. And with that info, we can identify the tree in the woods, the mother tree, and then collect sign, collect seed, and try to conserve those genetics. We also build on that further with long-term sites. So we have a site in New Mexico, a site in Arizona, and this is where we plant those same seed sources, so we kind of know their resistance levels. But here we can monitor that resistance over a longer period of time to see how durable that resistance is and if the pathogen's able to overcome it. Also great for looking at adaptive traits. We have seed sources in these sites from Mexico all the way through, most of the range of the southwestern white pine / limber pine hybrid. So this is the one out on the Mescalero Apache Reservation. It's a great day out there planting with the folks from the tribe. Also do a lot of aspen monitoring, so monitoring aspen health and regeneration, really focused on regeneration. I feel like that's the heart of aspen resilience at this point. So we do a lot of plot work, have localized plot networks on the Coconino and on the Kaibab. Connor Crouch with Kristen's lab also has installed a really beautiful plot network, basically statewide. So we'll maintain that off in the future and continue to remeasure that. So really thankful for that plot network. Also a lot of oyster shell scale work, and Amanda will probably talk about that a little more later. We also coordinate an annual meeting where we bring researchers together, managers together to talk about aspen and just kind of try to stay up to date on what's going on with aspen in Arizona. Now down to the oaks down in southern Arizona. So this has been kind of an emerging issue. So we've had a lot of dieback and mortality related to these Biscogneoxia species. So these Biscogneoxias really considered fairly weak pathogens, so really drought stressed trees that are already on their way out. Then this fungus will kind of take off. You can see it can basically cover the bowl so that all this black, I don't know if this thing has a laser on it or what, but all the black there and the white, that's all fungal fruiting tissue, the stromata. So it'll just, once a tree goes weak, it can just take off and colonize that whole tree, or it'll just kill parts of the tree. Both of these trees are pretty well colonized. But yeah, so these had not been reported in Arizona. They had not been reported causing disease on either of the zope species. So these were new observations of a pathogen that hadn't been noticed in the state. And that was pretty severe and causing pretty heavy mortality in different areas, especially with the silverleaf oak. So thus far, we've identified 2 species, Biscogniaxia mediterranea, which we were able to get a first report published on, working with Jane Stewart up in Colorado State. And then we have another species that's not described yet, and we're working with Kitty Garrett's lab on getting that one described and published and out to everybody. So it's an interesting new complex going on. It's not just the old dying trees, it's young saplings, it's trees next to creeks. It really seems like it's going to be a new issue. It's an interesting thing. Looking forward to keeping track of that. Working with Sarah Southern, who's at NAU. I can't remember what school she's exactly with, but she's an ecologist with the Emery-Oak group, and we're going to start getting some plots in to look at this stuff too and learn more about it. Also have a project with fungal diversity in the nursery, so we all get warm and fuzzy feelings when we talk about planting trees and planting native species out in the woods, but it's a really dangerous thing. We do introduce a lot of stuff out into the natural landscapes with this stuff, so it's really great to kind of keep up on that and hopefully develop some tools to help nursery managers identify what pathogens are in their nursery and figure out what they can do to mitigate any issues that might arise from planting those out into the forest. Right on time. All right. Now I'm passing it on to somebody else. Frost damage.
All right, I'm not going to bore you with stories about my childhood, but I just threw this up here that I did grow up in Flagstaff, and that is actually to date myself a photo of myself on the top of Mount Eldon before the radio fire happened. So, yeah, I am Monica Gaylord, and I am one of the entomologists over with FHP, and Amanda is the other one, and she will speak after me. So, grew up in Flagstaff, normal childhood, graduated Flag High. Summer after my senior year, I actually worked for Mike Wagner, who Joel luckily had a photo of him because I didn't have one of him, but worked for him over in his lab. And he was working on sawflies. So, and it's over on North Campus. So that's why it's a photo of the North Campus building, because it was before we moved over here, before the school forestry moved over here. And he was working on sawflies. So it's a great summer job. I'd go out and water these trees out in parks, and I'd keep the sawflies fed, give them some new branches and all that kind of stuff. But I will honestly say, and this is, I'm going to talk about myself here first because I'm an exhibit of not being on Life Plan A and having a lot of divergences. So I took a more winding road into this job. So at this point, forest entomology really wasn't on my radar as a job. And I went up, left Flagstaff, swore I was never coming back to this town, went and did just a bachelor's in biology at Lewis and Clark College, which is a small liberal arts college in Portland, Oregon. Does not have a forestry school. And I did a bachelor's in biology and a minor in chemistry, but the biology I did was really like microbiology, biochem, some more indoor lab kind of stuff. And then graduated from an undergrad and moved to Whitefish, Montana to be a ski bum. But my parents felt like I'd just gotten a degree and they didn't really want to support me being a ski bum, so I was forced to get a job. And I fell into a position with FIA, which is Forest Inventory and Analysis, for those of you that are not familiar with that acronym. And I worked there for 7 field seasons, and they used to, FIA has changed since I did it. Now they have a lot more permanent people on, but at that time they hired a whole bunch of seasonal people. An interesting fact, Kristen Waring and I worked together, so this is somewhat also a lecture of don't burn any bridges and be kind to the people you work with, because you can circle around and find them again. So I don't think Kristen is in this photo, but we used to have huge field crews. So every summer, like 35 people. And I started with FIA as a GS4 crew member. And then because it was a fast growing organization at that time, by the time I left 7 years later, I was a GS9 and running crews of 35 people. So it was a great experience, and it got me out in the woods and really piqued my interest in forestry and doing that kind of work. But I also realized I did not want to supervise that many people or just be a people supervisor. I was really interested in what happened with the data that we collected and looking at that a little bit closer. So I knew I needed to go back to grad school. And then for reasons we don't need to go into, but I ended up moving to Minnesota for a couple of years where I worked in Pillsbury muffin and cake research and development. And for those of you that think there is zero connection, this piece of equipment down here measures toughness of things. If you walk into Rich's lab, there might be a piece of equipment still there that looks very similar, because we use that to measure needle toughness on muffins, but it is also used to measure needle toughness, or to measure toughness of needles, which is very important for defoliating insects. So there is an interesting overlap between Pillsbury, Cake and Muffin research and development, and of course entomology. So anyway, I didn't last long there, and I worked for a graduate student then up in the Boundary Waters, got to just canoe around. He was a forestry graduate student. This is his publication, and I was just his field tech, but we canoed around all summer. There was a big blowdown event that happened, so we were crawling over like 20-foot high piles of logs. It was crazy. I had the worst bruises I've ever had in my life, but it was also good field experience, and also made me realize that I really need to go to grad school. So I came back to Flagstaff, a little bit tail between my legs, but I went and talked to Mike Wagner. And because I had worked for him and was a decent field assistant, and I think maybe also because he confused me with my older sister, who was probably an amazing field seasonal technician, he agreed to take me on because I was not a stellar undergrad. So he took me on into graduate school, and I got into the master's program here. And I worked, Mike was obviously my advisor, and then Tom Kolb. I did a lot of tree physiology, so I looked a lot at tree defense and seasonal dynamics of what trees were doing. So this is a photo of Mike's not in here, but that is Joel also. So again, be nice to the people on your master's committee because they could end up being your boss. So that was my master's work, was looking at bark beetles and tree defense and kind of seasonal patterns. Went on to do my PhD again with Mike, and then Tom was also on my committee and looked at the impacts of thinning treatments on bark beetle activity. So these are all kind of highlight overviews. I'm not going into details of any of these results. And Rich Hofstadter also came in at that time. He was a postdoc research faculty. So he was involved in this research as well. And then continued on as a postdoc with Tom Kolb and looked at pinyon and drought. And then I tried to stay on as research faculty. I discovered I am miserable at soft money fundraising and writing grants. So I muddled along there for a while, but finally Joel left, and I was able to apply to FHP in the bark beetle position. And I got on there in 2014. And these are some of the fun activities that I've done at FHP, which is we did some tree climbing. So our old aerial survey was the tree climbing lead instructor, and he took us all out and we took the tree climbing course. So that's me up in a tree. Get to see some beautiful country, and I'll talk a little bit more about some projects real briefly. And then actually we managed to convince our old boss, well, we did legitimately have some plots in Lockett Meadow in the winter that we needed to look at. So we took an Abbey 1 course to go look at those plots and be safe. So that isn't actually work skiing, but I did ski for work. So I am kind of the one-trick pony at FHP. I pretty much just work on bark beetles, but there are a ton of different bark beetle species. So there's enough to keep me busy and out of trouble most of the time. And these are some of the projects. So one of the big ones is down on the Coronado, on the road up to Mount Lemon there. We've had a whole lot of bark beetle activity in one of those first recreation sites that you hit. So we've been working with the silviculturists down there, and unfortunately it's popped up a couple times over the years where we need to go down there and do some suppression projects. So we're working with the silviculturists down there to go in and remove the trees, trying to get out the infested trees so we actually impact the bark beetle populations, but then also it's helping the forest because obviously these are going to turn into hazard trees, as Nick was talking about, so a bunch of dead trees in a campground. So that's one of the more recent projects. We also, and this is being recorded, FHP does not do research. So even though there are some things that look like research, these are filling management gaps. They're very applied, and we all get to dabble in that. So this is just one study that we did recently where we were looking at some ways to stop bark beetles from attacking trees by looking at some of the impacts of different chemicals and traps. So, and that area that I just showed there is probably burned right now, or burning. Anyway, another project that we're working on, and this is with Dr. Kolb also over here, and then Emma got to work on some of this last summer when she helped us. There's a spruce aphid that Amanda's going to talk about, and this is a non-native species that defoliates spruce and by itself is actually able to kill spruce. But we've also been concerned that these defoliated trees might be really susceptible to spruce beetle and that we would then have a spruce beetle outbreak after these attacks. So we've been going in and looking at these defoliated trees and trying to figure out which trees are being attacked by bark beetles, as well as looking at how the bark beetles do in the trees, and then what's happening with the defense characteristics of those trees that are defoliated. And then lastly, one of the bigger things that I've been working on all this time is that Arizona keeps burning, and Douglas fir beetle really likes burnt trees. So you have trees that survive a fire but are injured, and then Douglas fir beetle comes in and kills them. And that's obviously a big concern to our partners on the forest because you've already lost a lot of trees. So we can go in, we do have some pheromones that can help protect trees or help keep beetles out of certain areas. So now in 3 separate places that I've worked on, we've gone in and done some big pheromone projects to try and keep Douglas fir beetle from taking out more of the trees. So the Wallow fire in 2011, that little 500,000 acre fire in eastern Arizona. And then 2017, the Fry fire, we actually did some work there trying to protect some of the remaining Mount Graham red squirrel habitat. And then last summer on Mount Lemon, trying to protect some of the Mexican spotted owl. So those are some of the highlights of my job. And that says questions, but we'll do those at the end. Hand it over to me. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm up there. So this is my name's Amanda Brady, and I'm an entomologist with Monica in the group here. And so I have been working with forest health protection since 2005-6 in different ways. But I'm a native Arizonan, so grew up in Phoenix and came up here to NAU to start school forestry. So I did my bachelor's and my master's here. And while I was doing my bachelor's, I worked one summer for the entomology lab. And so that was great. And it was really my introduction to entomology. And before that, I thought I would be a wildlife biologist. And so I had applied for a position in wildlife and then that didn't work out. And so all of a sudden I had to get another job for the summer. And so I got a job with the entomology lab. And that was great. And we did lots of different work on bark beetles mostly and pesticides and other things. And so that was just a really great introduction. And I kind of fell in love with insects and how they were so diverse and really just caused change on the landscape. And so I did that for a year. And the following year, I actually worked for FHP and I worked for Joel on a project looking at bark beetles in all kinds of different systems. Woodland to pine mostly, and looking at FIA, remeasuring FIA plots. So I did that for a summer and graduated, and then I went into a SCEP program, which is actually like the pathways kind of equivalent back then. And so I was a SCEP student, and so that's where the Forest Service is investing in you, paying for grad school. They paid for my master's. And I did work also on bark beetles and fire injured trees in Northern California. So I worked out of Susanville, California, the Forest Service there from 2006 to 11. I came back to Arizona in 2011 for this position. And I've been here for a long time now, it seems. And so get to do a lot of different things. And our group is so small. We have, the 5 of us to cover the state, to cover so many things. And so we really get to dabble in a lot of things. And one of my primary duties every year, and it ebbs and flows how much support I give to this program, but I get to do and participate in the aerial survey work. And so, the Forest Service has a big aviation program with fire and stuff, but actually FHP has the 2nd largest aviation program in the Forest Service. And so we do a lot of flights annually. And it ebbs and flows how many hours we fly each year, how many hours I do, what my commitment is. And so last year was a big survey year for me, and I flew like over 100 hours, but we're monitoring, 12 to 15 million acres annually across all lands. And so this is actually a photo from our pinch hitter training, which is, learning how to land a plane, because we're in the plane so much every year that, you know, if something happens, they want us to be a little prepared. So every few years, we get to do these different trainings, and it's really important, it's really great, and I really just love the aerial survey program. It really gives me this broad landscape view of what's going on across the state, and it really helps me cue in on other things that, you know, I better be paying attention to, or, you know, we pass it along to the staff, what's going on, and to our land managers anyhow. So this is a big part of our program and monitoring and detection across all land. So that's a really great thing, and it gives us these really broad, important perspectives, and we use these data to give it to land managers and for planning purposes, and this is how, like, we start to identify vulnerabilities on the landscape and then make recommendations on what they can do to mitigate some of these things through prevention or through suppression when we're trying to just reduce the population of any of it. So this is Sedona, and this is one of these views from last year. We had a lot of mortality last year, and of the 10 years that I've been doing this job, this was like, last year was the most significant year of damage that I've ever been involved in looking at and monitoring. So one of the other primary responsibilities that I cover is just monitoring native and exotic defoliators and insects. So I should have said this before. So Monica really covers the bark beetles, and I cover native defoliators, you know, chewing insects, and then also sap suckers and feeders. And so I really work on those a lot lately. But let's see. I think the top is the pointer. Anyhow, so the trap in the middle just shows a pheromone trap, and this is Douglas fir tussock moth. So this is one of the native defoliators that we monitor every year. And so we work with our partners on federal land. So, you know, these monitoring programs are statewide. And so we really rely on our partners, our federal land managers, to help us do a lot of this monitoring, and then we coordinate. I feel like a really important part of our position is just coordinating and talking and interacting with everybody across the state. And so as we're doing this pheromone trapping across the state annually, as we get these high trap catches, it will signal something else to do, you know. So this is a native insect, it outbreaks it feeds on white fir and Douglas fir. So it can be a big defoliating insect, and mixed conifer. And so when we get these high trap responses, then we'll go out and we'll do these sheep eating, and you can see a couple small caterpillars on there. So we do these, you know, we get to be out on the landscape and really just see these really beautiful areas and do these activities which are, you know, related to monitoring. They're like counting things. They're fairly easy in a lot of ways, you know, but it's just getting the skills and being in those doing that work for lots of years, you know, it's great. And so this happened, you know, these defoliating insects outbreak periodically, and it depends on, you know, the objectives of this site. Like, you know, this outbreak was out on the Mokion Rim and really remote area, and so we're really not trying to manage that. You know, that's a natural occurrence. And so, but in other areas where there's like recreation, like we was talking about hazard trees, so we want to mitigate impacts in those areas, but we choose, you know, it's all dependent on what the manager is wanting to do in that area. So anyhow, so Douglas fir tussock moth, gypsy moth or spongy moth is another exotic defoliator which I manage or monitor for across the state annually. And so also working with lots of different land managers to help get those pheromone traps out. And you know, gypsy moth is a problem in the east, and so where it's not occurring, we still have this monitoring and memorandums with APHIS and other agencies to do this work. Yeah, and so really, you know, the heart of what I'd like to do is working on these invasive sap-sucking insects. And so this has really been a bigger part of my program of work in the last 5 years. And so a lot of this is from these two specific insects that I work on a lot lately, are both exotic and invasive. And so the spruce aphid up top And so this is originally from Europe and has been in Arizona in the White Mountains since the late 80s and has been, has periodic cycles of outbreaks. And really it's just causing significant impacts, and the most ecologically impactful areas are occurring here from spruce aphid. So it's really this this work in these sap-sucking insects that I focus on a lot lately, and really trying to develop, monitoring the extent, the impacts that they cause, and then also trying to work towards mitigating that, because we don't want to just watch and monitor what's going on and how bad it is, but we want to come up with solutions. And so that's where we really team with academia and other partners and the National Forest to line all these things up. And so we have lots of great partners here at NAU. And so this is just some of the landscape damage that you really see happening from that aerial survey view, which kind of really sets you in oh shoot, this is really a big deal and we need to work on this. So the top picture is severe defoliation from this spruce aphid, where they are eating almost all the needles except for the most current needles. And so really these trees suffer severe mortality, and Engelmann spruce is occurring here in Arizona at the very bottom of its extent for that host. And so it's really having significant impacts here, and lots of tree mortality, lots of ecological damage. And these are high elevation systems. So if these watersheds aren't healthy, then our water sources, potential for fire, and there's lots of threatened, not lots, there's a threatened and endangered fish species in this area also that depends on clean water here, not fire impacted watersheds. So spruce aphid is a big agent that I concentrate on, and it's really great because a lot of the damage actually is on tribal lands. And so Joel mentioned that was one of the partners that we serve quite often, and Emma actually got to go out. I think Emma's taking this picture, and that's why she's not in the picture, but she was out with us last year to monitor these permanent plots, and we get to work with the tribes, and we get to work with all these people and see beautiful areas. And so this is, really high elevation stuff, 11,000 feet. And I think we got to drink out of the spring that feeds that had waters of White River. So just really beautiful and lots of interactions. And I think partnerships are probably the most critical thing that we build and work with people together to solve or to at least look at issues and try to mitigate them as best we can. So, we're looking at things like what trees are dying, and can we predict that? Can we help through lots of monitoring of many trees for many years, 5 years? We looked and saw what trees die, and we can create defoliation indexes, and then try to predict and try to identify trees that could potentially die after these outbreaks and might be a target for removal, so that you're not dealing with a lot of hazard trees in specific areas afterwards. But as you can see from the pie graph, this is the big blue chunk is spruce aphid caused mortality in these Engelmann spruce. And so spruce aphid is really a killer on its own, but there's some residual trees that need that could be a target for spruce beetle. So anyhow, we also see that that they died really soon after their outbreaks. And so this is when we can try to strategize and promote a time to salvage or work at removing that material. And then we try to develop other pest management strategies. So this is using Bavaria bassiana, and this work was done with Rich Hofstetter to test Bavaria against spruce aphid. And so we started, in the lab spraying little twigs that were infested, and that worked great. And we saw a lot of mortality. And so then we tried to scale up to the tree on the landscape. And then there were no spruce aphids at all that whole year. So hard, things have to go on for many years sometimes for us. And then we came back to, just getting small trees and infesting those and then watching those as a surrogate. So lots of different steps, and if things don't always work out exactly the way you want, we just, are persistent. And then this is the other insect that I work a lot with a lot of collaborators here. And so there's a lot of work on aspen, and we're really lucky to have a great group that's supportive with the National Forest System. So the Coconino and the Kaibab are actually implementing silviculture treatments. And so this is a lot of work with Connor Crouch and Kristen Waring, Rich Hostetter. Kelsey's also doing natural predator work. So just really trying to develop, because this is an emergent invasive exotic insect that we have not dealt with. It moves from urban areas into the natural wildlands and is widespread and causing a lot of mortality in Aspen, which has tons of problems already. And so, yeah, we really needed this team. We just recently published something Connor did, lead author, and just documenting an emergent issue. And so from there, really noticed that this is really impacting ungulate exposures. And so we're protecting aspen here. We're trying to recruit it and maintain it from these other factors, mostly ungulates that really reduce regeneration. And so these are really high value areas. And so this is what we're really concentrated on, preserving these and mitigating oyster shell skin. And so I'll wrap it up there, but we're doing this work. You know, we're testing sanitation treatments, we're testing clear fells, and we're working with folks here to do this great work. Yeah, so I'll pass it on to Isaac. There's Connor, lots of regen after treatment.
I'm Isaac Bill. I'm a biological scientist on a 90-day detail here as a helping out. And I'm actually up in Juneau, Alaska. I've been there for a couple of years where I primarily do work as an aerial surveyor and assist the entomologist and pathologist with ground surveys as well. Like Amanda, I was born in Arizona. I grew up in Cave Creek and Prescott. I graduated from ASU with a degree in plant biology. And I first worked for the Arizona Department of Agriculture as an agricultural inspector, and then in the state agricultural lab for a couple of years. And that's where I first got training in entomology and plant pathology. And worked after that, started working in 2015 for the Forest Service out of Gunnison, Colorado, and later Lakewood, where I started working with NAU alum Sky Stevens, and after a couple of years of working with her, she helped me get into graduate school under another NAU alum, Seth Davis. And so at Colorado State University, I got my master's in 2018 studying the effects of temperature on spruce beetle flight phenology and across the latitudinal range of Colorado. And then after that, then I got the permanent position at the FHP up in Juneau. So I just, I actually have been working a little bit on the pinyon dips phenology studies out at Red Mountain. So I included those slides there. Since it's already kind of been covered by Amanda, but this is basically areas of our aerial survey coverage. So it's a little bit over 23 million acres. And so how do we monitor such an area? Again, like I mentioned, aerial detection surveys, intensive ground monitoring, satellite imagery, and then again, aircraft systems. And aerial detection surveys cover large areas quickly and efficiently. So they're like a pinyon acre, 17 to 30 acres a second. And how we do it is we use basically a Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy tablet where we have digital mobile sketch mapper software on that. And so we're looking out the window, looking for the damage type, for the location, extent, intensity, and we draw polygons. And part of what I'm doing here, helping out, is loading up these tile packages, TPKs of native imagery, and then we also will load it fire parameters, update fire parameters, last year's damage, areas of interest, flight lines for where we're gonna be flying. And then it's basically what we're looking at while we're mapping. And so we're monitoring for force damage such as defoliation, mortality, and management, like Nick was talking about, hazard trees and campgrounds. So here's how the ADS data appears as polygons. So we can produce maps from there, summary stats, reports like our annual forest health conditions report, distribution, analyses. And this is our 2021 survey data that's all publicly available on our website. And on this level, you might not be able to tell much, but I just kind of zoomed in here. So here's Sunset Crater as a reference point. So this is what our data would look like on the map. So we just click on a polygon up there, it gives you the number of acreage, the damage type, in that case, mortality, bark beetles on ponderosa pine, percent affected tree species. And then we have like the yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Can tell, so if anyone has questions they want to ask now. And then we'll move to the discussion.
Who wants a job in forest health protection? I think there could be some opportunities here pretty soon, so keep your eye out. Any questions?
What advice would you give to someone that is
I would say like working these seasonal positions for sure. I mean, that's how I became introduced to the group and then started working with them more closely, you know, with the masters. And it was all about me even knowing that they're there. You know, sometimes we aren't advertised as much as we should be, but yeah, it's a great position. And I think just you guys testing us too, because you want to know that it works for you also, right? That you're interested. So it's kind of nice to do a temporary position and test it out and see if you like it. And then because our group is so small, any FHP position that you hire for, if like in a permanent scenario, we know it all of each other, you know, we all know each other. So it's providing good recommendations.
And if you're a graduate student, you know, generally most of the positions within forest health protection, most of the professional level positions have at least a master's degree. And so if you are a graduate student, you're working on a forest health related thesis project or a dissertation, if you can include the assistants or kind of collaborate with forest health protection, you know, Amanda mentioned like you were a SCEP student, and we've had other pathway students too that have had projects funded in part through Forest Health, or just sometimes we can serve as on your committee as well. So I'm adjunct faculty member, and so can serve on several graduate student committees, and you kind of get introduced a little bit more and make those connections. It's important as well. So just everything you can kind of do to establish those connections is beneficial.
work, so thank you. We appreciate you guys.
Hopefully, we're good neighbors.
I think.
Not too loud, so that's good. But I guess you have to be there to be loud.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll be into our offices on a more regular basis, official basis, starting on June 6th. As our people haven't heard that with the Forest Service is kind of moving towards a hybrid workforce, kind of telework and being in the office, but that's all supposed to be in place by June 6th. So feel free to come over. We're back in if you have questions or want to chat more about it, opportunities and things like that.
What is your general split between field work and office work?
So it depends on the position. So I'd let the staff talk about what they do and talk about it.
Seems to vary. I mean, the summers can be full field work all the time, but the winter seems to be more in the office. But with that oak work, I'm gonna be getting out in the field in the winter, down in southern Arizona. So it's pretty flexible. You just gotta make sure to get everything done. I try to maximize my field work though, because that's where I'm happiest. That's why I went into this, and collaborating helps stay out of the office a little bit. If you get on with some grad students and things, and they can do a lot of the office work, and we can kind of coordinate, and just to help collaboration. I mean, we still do office work, but I don't want to make it sound like we're pushing this work off. But I kind of think we're kind of like, we play middleman a lot, trying to identify issues, communicate those issues to the right people. And then, I mean, it's a great opportunity for grad students too to get involved with these forest health projects. I'm getting derailed here. But yeah, as far as forest health profession goes and office work and field work, it's absolutely ideal, I think. Because you can really kind of make your own schedule and just make sure you get your work done, and you can get a lot of field work in. It's great.
And because there's so few of us, we really have to do all of our stuff, like Monica's looking at her beetles in the microscope, and it's like we have to do all of those, being in the field, to crunching our data, doing all of the different aspects. So it's well-rounded.
I don't get out of the field, unfortunately, very much. Kind of my role, but definitely had many years where I was in the field a whole lot, and definitely enjoy the time in the field. And again, to be able to work with a wide diversity of different partners and different aspects, from training to technology development to land management, we really have a lot of opportunities doing work in the field. But yeah, I enjoy my job as well now, certainly, and supervising the crew here, a great staff, and most of my time's more kind of managing the program and meetings.
It's also a lot of travel. We cover the whole state. So it's a lot of time on the road. So it is kind of a tough job if you're a homebody, at least in Arizona. There's some other areas where it's more localized. But yeah, we're on the road a lot throughout the summer, throughout the winter, camping, staying in hotels, things like that. So a lot of good travel going on.
Great, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. It's 5, so we'll take a 10-minute break and then head over to room 34 for a discussion